to grow. That man was created to grow. Now that growth path is upwards and outwards. Upward is seen as the Sirat al-Mustaqim, and outward is seen as the Sabilillah. As we grow upward and higher in moral values and spiritual values, he grows outwards to include others. We have to include others in this, what God gives us. What God gave us wasn't intended for the sake of you as a self-made person and all of a sudden you just good for nobody but yourself. Sometimes your righteousness, all it does is make you feel good about yourself and look down on everybody else. So this, what God gave us, wasn't intended for the sake of the individual, just a self-grandizement, a self-individual modifying himself and making himself look good, but it also was intended for a much bigger purpose. A much bigger purpose. So his intended growth was the growth on the Sirat al-Mustaqim. Now he was growing up higher in moral ethics, higher in his appreciation, higher in his understanding, higher in his development. But he was also, his outward growth was also, his upward growth was also dependent upon his outward growth. Because the more he took in, the more responsibility he took in, the greater he was going to grow in necessity for being able to be a productive quality that God wanted for him to be. His productive quality was going to be based upon how much he grew upward and how much he was going to share outward. So the Muslims are always told, that you're going to have to, it's more than just becoming a person of faith, and your faith is identified more than just is your going to the masjid and praying and that kind of stuff, but it's also talking about how that particular identification is expressed in what you do. How that is expressed in what you do. And we oftentimes, when I would see the imam, I would always see a man who was working. I would always see a man that was working. And I didn't see no man who could give us polished speech and then let's go somewhere and sit down. Man, I ain't got time for them. Sometimes the imam is only come to the masjid to give a Jummah khutbah, and then all of a sudden you don't see him to Jummah next week. And what in between the time of first Jummah and the second Jummah did you do? And the community around his area is continually going down. So how was this great benefit that you say that you have in this prophet that you say that you represent? How are you demonstrating your faith in what he has given you? How has that been demonstrated? And we have to understand that there's instructions in the Quran, and those instructions in the Quran are specifically there for reasons. And God says, "Walas inna al-insana la yafikus illa alladhina aminu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr." It said, by the token of time, the human is in loss. The human being, how is he in loss? He's not quite moving like he's supposed to be moving. He's not quite doing the things that he should be doing. But here is what I want to focus on, and understanding what the prophet situation was. And it talks about going upward and going outward, and Imam said this is a mutual cooperation with people working together. bringing in, your outward growth is going to have to bring in other people into the association in order to establish what God wants for us. So you have to, your association, your watu soul, you're associating with all these people. You're bringing all of these people together, and you're working to achieve something bigger than your self situation about how good you are and how great you are. Allah tells in the Quran, it tells us, he said, that tells us, and it's instructions. Instructions is, it says, the individual, a human being, or the person, has to move outward, whether they're equipped heavily, lightly, or heavily. Whether you know the whole book or just one ayah. Whether you just came into the faith or whether you've been here for 40, 50 years. That your effort is to establish this thing outward. Just don't sit on it. Do something with it. The mission is to deliver enlightenment in the form of words, in the form of teaching that offers a healing to the sick. Sick physically, sick in their intelligence, sick in the spirit, or in the soul. That what God gives us offers healing. And it's a mercy, the way the words God gives us and how they're delivered. God is often merciful, the merciful. And how he delivers for us is really merciful. Sometimes when we see something, oftentimes we may not deliver it with too much mercy. Sometimes people come into your association, they ain't got no business there, and they know they ain't got no business there either. Oftentimes we don't go through mercy. We go through another channel and say, to make it real plain that you don't do this no more. But even in the most harshest of situations, we see the prophet, and we see the information that God gives us is given to us in a very merciful way. Very merciful. So it offers a healing for us, for the physically sick in the body. We find a prescription for healthy living physically, as the prophet offers us an alternative to overeating. He offers us an alternative to our overeating. He tells us the stomach is seen in 3 parts. Just your stomach is seen in 3 parts. You have to understand, just your stomach is seen in 3 parts. Sometimes we see a big banquet of food and everything is full. You ain't got no room for no water and you ain't got room to breathe. And you just sitting there suffering. Just one, man, I had a real good meal. But you can't breathe. You can't hardly stand up. And you really want something to wash some of that stuff down, but you ain't got no room to even get no water. So he offers us a remedy. The prophet offers you a remedy. He say, here, your stomach should be broken down in 3 parts. You got a part for the food. You got a part for some water or for some drink. And now you got a part for breathing. Now it seems like that would be a prescription to lose some weight. And it seems like if we could follow that prescription, we could lose some weight and thereby possibly, because most of the issues that we're suffering comes by way of our stomach, comes by what we put into us, comes by the way of what we digest. comes by the way of how we feed our stomach. That's on the first level. He tells us 1/3 is for food, 1/3 for water, and 1/3 for air. He tells us proper food to consume. The proper food to consume. And here's the beauty of our leader. I ain't never heard nobody talk like this. Our leader said the Quran addresses the whole person. Every bit of it. Every time Allah speaks to you, He's just not speaking to one part of you. Like I might be saying, brother, I've been talking to a brother and saying, hey, you need to fix your shoes up on you. Well, I'm just talking about the shoes. But while Allah is talking about the shoes, He's talking about every aspect related to that. If there's a spiritual part of that, He's addressing that too. If there's an intellectual part of that, He's addressing that too. He's addressing it at the same time He's talking about the first thing. Now, how can we do that? I can see how the challenge was put out, and he said, "You produce a surah similar to this. Just give me one ayat. Hook it up. Just give me one thing that you can hook up that's similar to this book right here that I'm giving you, that God has given you. Find something how you can hook it up to bring it in such a way as that it's going to address everything at the same time." You know, there was an ayat, a short little surah that was posted on the Kaaba, and it dumbfounded everybody. All the poets read, and they were trying to figure out how did that? What is this that's up here? It was so dumbfounding. Dear beloved brothers and sisters, God tells us, and I'm gonna give this to you because to me I think it's important because it addresses everything. He says, and I'm gonna just do it in English. He says, "You are forbidden to eat meat of any animal that dies by itself." Any animal that dies by itself. Now see that in another way. Just don't see it as food so far as from a physical standpoint. But if you look at an animal that dies by itself, what did it die of? Maybe it got old, and the system started to break down. Over the period of time, it's passed away. And we know that normally things just don't wear out. Something started to wearing out in it. Maybe it was the heart just stopped, but something caused it to stop. Maybe it stopped breathing, but something caused it to happen. But God said, don't feed yourself on dead animals, on dead, something that's on the dead thing. How can we see that as it relates to the world that we live in? How can we see that as it relates to people who profess al-Islam? How do we see that in some of a sucker getting up and said that God has instructed him in Quran to go out and blow up a whole bunch of folks? How do we see that? What is the language? What is feeding that thinking?
Yes, sir.
I remember I was reading somewhere where Imam was invited to come to a particular country to teach them al-Islam in the 21st century. Seemed like somebody's using al-Islam in the 15th century or 4th century. Seemed like that's could be a dead language. Seemed like there could be dead words that someone is feeding upon and learning Islam from a position that no longer is acceptable or even addresses the time that we live in.
That's right.
Possible. 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 Didn't God tell us